thing. Maybe I don't want to be on.
It's a heavy one this episode as we climb into this Aermacchi AM.3 Bosbok. The Bosbok is outfitted with a Lycoming GSO-480, producing 340 horsepower at 3,400 RPM. According to the owner, who you'll hear from later in this video, this airplane is one of 6 currently registered in the United States, and one of 2 or 3 that are still flying. I climb into the airplane today with Elliot Sigwin, a Mojave Desert test pilot with quite the resume. Strap in, because this episode is a heck of a ride.
My name is Andy. This is my 1974 Aermacchi AM.3 Bosbok. In the late 60s, there was a need for an update of the forward air control aircraft by the Italians to replace the bird dog. The AM.3 was one of them, and the Sai Machete was the other. Unfortunately, the Sai Machete won the contract, so the Bosbok was not produced. However, in the early 70s, the South African Air Force came knocking and decided to purchase them. 40 were purchased by the South African Air Force, and they were used during the Angolan conflict from the 70s all the way through up until 89. After that, the Air Force decommissioned them and they were sold off to private buyers. Acquired this 2 years ago. The significance of the aeroplane is that my brother, who was a South African Air Force pilot, flew this particular plane in the Bush War. It runs a GSO-480 up front, 340 horsepower, burning about 17 gallons an hour in cruise. The airplane has a 42-foot wingspan, 36 foot long, and has a max gross takeoff weight of 4,200 pounds. The airplane has recently been imported into the United States, shipped over in a container. We required reassembly in the US, obviously, and because of that, I have a test pilot flying it, and that's why Emma has not flown with me, but has flown with a test pilot. I had not flown the airplane for 12 months. The day before yesterday, I flew a decathlon, and the landing of the decathlon was so easy, and then you get into this, and because of the weight of it and the inertia of it and the power that you've got, the big wings, the big flaps and all the rest of it, the airplane does present a challenge. The gear has got quite a lot of spring in it, so it has a tendency to bounce, but it's nothing that somebody can't learn to control, can't learn to fly after being taught properly. It's in the experimental exhibition category. My aim this year is to do Sun and Fun if I'm still here, but to definitely do Oshkosh. Only one has ever been to Oshkosh before, and that was over 20 years ago. So I would really like to take it up to Oshkosh and to let it sit with the other FAC aeroplanes, especially the bird dogs, as that was what it was used for during the war. The geared engine doesn't make a massive amount of difference. You just, like we've talked about, you just can't thump the engine quickly. The actual running of the engine, you just, on the ground, you sit at a higher idle than you would normally do with another engine. I think geared engines got a really bad rap because people didn't know how to look after them and didn't know how to treat them. You get out of one aeroplane and you get into a Queen Air that has a geared engine and you shove the power forward the same way as you would do on any other engine, and it doesn't like that. So I've owned, prior to this, I owned the Big Brother, which is the Atlas Kudu, has the same engine, and I never had a day's trouble with it.
So what are some things that you're doing on startup? What are some stuff you're looking for?
Yeah, so the big thing on these is the fuel pump tends to flood the engine.
Okay.
So we're starting it with mixture at cutoff, and then it's got a built into the switch here, just like on a Beechcraft, is a primer. And so we're relying totally on the primer to start with the mixture at cutoff, and then once it fires, just before the RPM starts to decay because the prime's gone, then we move the mixture lever forward and it takes over. It's the most automated fuel control I've dealt with on a flat motor.
Gotcha.
Surprisingly hands-off. The next thing is because of the geared motor, you don't want to get lash in the gears, so you want to keep the revs up.
Gotcha.
And you combine that with the sort of the gearing stuff, and it's an awkwardly high idle for somebody who's used to sort of standard flat motor stuff. So
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Isn't that one of the biggest things on these geared motors? People aren't used to the high RPMs. I mean,
right, and so there's a tendency to pull it back to sort of hard idle, which gets you down near 1,000, which starts to feel more like, you know, your 150 or your 185 or whatever. But it's going to be hard on stuff.
System not available.
But like right now, like this is not a lot of power, but it sounds like it's screaming, right? Well, because we're making 25 turns.
2,500, yeah. That's like that's like max for a lot of small airplanes.
Right. You go get in a modern Mooney, I think it's 2350 for takeoff.
Yeah.
We're going to go down here all the way to the end, and we'll flip it around, and we'll do the power checks.
That's good.
Watching for ditches. And there's some debate versus POH versus this checklist that came with the airplane about where to do the mag checks. We've been doing them at 26. The book says 17. Big thing for me is that both sets of mags work, and they do. Power to hard idle. So there's your conventional idle, right?
Yep.
Which of course is not what we want. And then back up to 15. All right, get some roll going. We can look. I'm looking right.
I don't see anybody.
I don't see anybody. Okay, take our center line. Tail wheel to go. Tail wheel's latched, we'll slow down. All right, come up on the governor. There's the governor. About 10 inches to go a boost. We're rolling. There's full boogie. I'll make sure you get that stick forward so we don't have to listen to the stall horn. Let it accelerate a little bit. Boost is coming back. Prop's coming back. First notch of flaps.
So it seems like a whole lot of power for basically not a lot of airspeed. I mean, why were these airplanes outfitted with these engines?
It's a great question. So I think to really tell that story, you have to look at the history of the need within the South African Air Force and the move that took them from the Bird Dog to this aircraft to the Marchetti, with steadily more power in each one. It's sort of like looking out at those flaps. Like, that's a very complicated system.
Right.
That drive motor is like awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
But like, that's not the kind of thing you would develop for a Cessna, right? The price point's just too high, regardless of what it buys you. And so a lot of this stuff only makes sense on a big government contract, right?
Right. Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your background. I mean, you say test pilot school, you know, what kind of stuff have you gotten to do in your career?
Right, so started out, much like yourself, flying family, hanging out the airport, bumming rides. I was looking for something that would combine sort of all the stuff I was doing, right? So I was working as a mechanic, building airplanes. We were building Stearmans and T6s. I had a 150 project that I was doing. And then I was interested in engineering. I was flying. So I was looking for a way to kind of gather all those pieces together. While I was trying to figure that out, I went to engineering school. And then being at engineering school, you realize, well, it's a lot of theory, but you're not getting to do sort of the rest of it.
Yeah.
So as I was coming up on graduation, I made a list of the coolest companies I could think of, and it turned out a lot of them were in Mojave. There was a company there that was doing rocket racing. There was a company there that was doing Reno racing. And then there was the Spaceship One Scale Composites. So long story short, I drove myself out there and just knocked on doors so I could find somebody who would hire me, and basically never left. That gave me access to Reno, gave me access to the spaceship programs, lots of prototypes, lots of airplanes. The big thing there is that you realize that flight test sort of is the center of the Venn diagram. You're doing the flying stuff, but you got to be able to talk engineer, you got to be able to talk to the mechanics, the fabricators, and everybody else, and that's sort of where I fell in love with test.
Oh, we all know that mechanics and engineers don't necessarily communicate the best all the time.
I don't know what you're talking about. I've never experienced that.
Are you joking or are you serious?
No, it was a joke.
Okay.
So yeah,
I can't see your face back here.
There's a reason why it's three different pieces of the Venn diagram. They're three different personalities that don't necessarily get along.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you combined all of those aspects into basically you kind of forged yourself a career. That's interesting.
Trying. Yeah, so the big thing was during the spaceship program, we were looking for astronauts within Scaled. It was clear who was going to get the first flights and that kind of stuff, but for setting up the space line, it was clear there was going to be lower level test gigs available. At that time, I was 24 years old. I would have been the youngest guy to ever go to space, but there was 7 or 8 other guys that were looking for that slot. So we were all trying to identify ourselves within the group to be the next one.
Yeah.
The path I took was building airplanes. So I built a couple airplanes, set some records with them, raced them at Reno, that kind of stuff. And then once I did that, I had access to other guys that needed help with their racers or with their test programs, whatever. And then that was all about building to get into the astronaut slot at Scaled. Once the program ended at Scaled and those pilots were never picked for reasons we don't need to go into, all of us guys that were fighting for those slots sort of hit the breeze.
Yeah.
So been out on the market since then. So we're coming up on downwind of beam. We'll do first notch. We're in the white arc. Waimama traffic, gray experimental, right downwind, or lane ahead.
Now, we were talking a little bit earlier about on these touch and goes, you're gonna kind of keep some prop in, right?
Right. So that's the big debate with this motor. The gearbox doesn't like to be backloaded, and so there's a tendency to make the gearbox chatter. So there's that. The other side is that, especially with Andy in here and full bags, I don't want to be wanting for power. So you're trying to take care of that motor as much as you can, but putting it through a fence is also pretty hard on the motor. And I'm trying to look for about 65 here with 66% flaps. Carrying just a touch of power, sort of a flat approach. Feel the bottom kind of falling out, so just a touch of power. And we'll let it round out here, see what we can do. And that's all the up elevator we got. Not too bad.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit earlier about that, the tail low wheel landings. I guess this airplane seems to like it like most of them do, huh? Kind of works for a lot of different airplanes.
Yeah, so for me, I don't get a chance to fly the same airplane very long. And it increases the chances of success just opening with a tail low wheelie.
Right.
I think the book says that this airplane needs to be 3-pointed.
Okay.
My focus this week has been on making the landing successful and getting Andy up to speed so we can take this thing cross country. So I have not been pushing the envelope on ultimate short field performance.
All right, well, Andrew, thank you so much for letting us fly your plane today. Elliot, thank you for taking me flying and showing me this incredible airplane. So, Andrew, tell me a little bit about you said this is one of 4 in the U.S.?
One of 6 in the US.
6, okay.
We don't know where 4 are.
Okay.
This one and 949 Zulu Alpha we do know.
Okay.
But the other 4 we are not able to get hold of the current owners, which we'd like to do because we'd like to get them all flying again.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people are interested in contacting you about this airplane, let me get my mic a little closer to you.
The best way is probably to pop you a message on Flying Doodles, and you've got my details, so you can give me drop me a message and we can work it from there.
Okay, well, sounds good. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. This is an incredible airplane, really cool to be able to fly it. Probably not a chance I would have gotten from any other airplanes, since you just brought this one here. So
yeah,
very cool.
Second day of flying it in the US. Yeah.
What do you think of it, Elliot?
I've been impressed by the handling qualities in general. It's just a real sweet flying airplane. For how big it is and how much inertia it has, you don't really feel it, right?
Yeah.
Besides having to run the trim a little bit. So,
yeah.
And then obviously that motor is freaking rad. So it's fun to sit behind it.
We were talking about, I know I keep saying this, but it seems like a lot of motor for not that much airspeed. But I mean, what it was made for, it's pretty good capability.
Absolutely. Slow flight and used for forward air control primarily, and that's what it was needed for.
Yeah, very cool. All right, you guys, we'll see you on the next episode of Flying Doodles. Thank you so much for watching, and check out our Patreon. We'll see you next time. For anyone watching that's interested in a more detailed walkthrough of the Bosbok, head over to our Patreon and subscribe for as little as $1 a month. Your subscriptions and supports to our Patreon allow us to provide things like early releases and exclusive interviews that wouldn't be available anywhere else. So make sure to head on over and check it out.